and I can talk a little bit more about that later. We've been generally happy with how the scheme's performing on some of the critical decisions around who's eligible, how we determine reasonable and necessary supports, given that, again, legislation can specify that in very broad terms, but once you get down to the nitty-gritty, is it this, is it that? And really getting the balance right between saying we want sufficient evidence to be able to justify the expenditure, but we don't want to use the requirement for it to be evidence-based to stifle innovation. Now, that's always a difficult balance to get. I think we're going okay in getting that balance, but where we have had issues, our approach has been to establish reference groups and appoint experts to do some work on it. So we're doing a lot of work around early intervention for autism. Who know that area would know there are many different models of therapeutic and facility-based supports for children with autism through to adults, and a lot of passion involved with people promoting different views. So our approach has been to pull everybody in to form a reference group. We've appointed probably 2 of the top academics in Australia to do all of the work and just deliver back to the agency a framework within which we can make that decision. Doing the same in relation to some sensory disability supports for children with hearing and vision impairment, and we'll keep doing that. We're looking at the moment at the nature of behavioural interventions for people with complex support needs and behavioural support problems, because generally the disability systems have wrapped up the person and quarantined them and not looked at intervention types of programs. So we're quite keen to roll that out as well. Now, turning to the next thing. As I said, we've got about 14,000 people in now. We started with 4 trials in June 2013, or July 2013. We extended it to 3 more trials in July last year, and those extensions were in the ACT, an area around Tennant Creek, the Barclay region in the Northern Territory, and an area around Perth Hills in WA. And our projection is that by the end of June next year, which is the end of the trial period, we'll have around about 28,000 people in the scheme, which that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Except that 3 years after that, we have 460,000 people in the scheme. So we're extremely concentrated on building for that scale. At the moment, the Commonwealth and state governments are in negotiations around how those full scheme will roll out, and it will be slightly different in each state. At the COAG Disability Reform Council last Friday, all of the ministers reaffirmed their commitment to a 1 July 2016 commencement for all participating states and territories, which is everyone except WA. WA does have a trial, but they're testing or a comparative testing between an NDIA delivered NDIS and a state-based delivered NDIS, and depending where that evaluation arrives will depend upon how and indeed potentially when they enter the scheme. So, but for everyone else, there's a commitment to start in July 2016, and the agreements to give effect to that are under negotiation at the moment, and the ministers have again indicated that they will have the details of that in broad terms completed by the middle of this year, so 1 year out. And I don't hammer politicians very often because I work for them, but I do keep saying, you need to get me that decision 12 months out or we won't be able to deliver this, because we've got to get infrastructure in place, we've got to get people employed. But there's a very strong commitment for that to occur. There was a little bit more information out of the Reform Council meeting last Friday. And so, for example, New South Wales has indicated that it will be favouring a 2-year rollout. That is round about 140,000 people in New South Wales entering the scheme over 2 years, and proposing to do that on a geographic basis and then with some priorities of programs. Other states are similar, so I expect both Queensland and Victoria will be somewhat probably geographic and program based as well, and Tasmania and South Australia, which started trials with age cohorts, may continue with the statewide age approach, uncertain. But New South Wales certainly is likely to be geographic, and as many of you would know, New South Wales also announced a month or so ago that there would be a further trial starting in Penrith area from the 1st of July this year. So we're busily getting offices up and running, and that's going to be for 0 to 18-year-olds for about 2,000 young people in the Penrith and the Pea and Blue Mountains area. And that's likely to be a base from which the scheme would then expand. There's some things that will have to be done differently to deliver that sort of scale, and the agency is not a party to those bilateral agreements, but we are a party to the operational plans that say how they will be delivered. And some of these are lessons that we have appropriately learnt during the trial. The first one, and probably the key advice that we've given, is that one of the failings of the trial has been that the first point of contact that the person has had with the agency has been a discussion around funded supports. And the scheme was very much intended to build upon existing family, informal and community supports and look at funded supports as supplementing and sustaining and maintaining that. And so we have recommended, and I believe it's been accepted, that there needs to be 2 programs that roll out in advance of the planning discussions. The first is what the Productivity Commission called Tier 2, and what is now called information linkages and capacity building. And this is supports that's not just limited to people who would be coming into the scheme, but to all people with disability, to provide the necessary information they need, to link them up either to the NDIA or to other mainstream disability support services. And here I mean mainstream to mean things like health and education and child protection and criminal justice system, or whatever else services providing supports to people with disability. And to start the work around focusing the person's plan on their individual goals, so that capacity building work, which is critically important. And the other component which sort of fits neatly with that is local area coordination. The agency delivers 2 critical services to people with disability. One is the development of a plan, but the other is this local coordination built upon a very successful model in WA, which been in operation for 25 years, which focuses upon a long-term relationship, which is very different to the way disability operates now, where the person's intersection with the relevant state agencies, and understandably as a result of those current service systems being limited and rationed in the funds they have, of being one in which the person has to really present themselves as most in need, to catastrophise their position, to get as much as they can and then to hang on to it. Well, this service, the NDIS, is very different. It is flexible. It intends to be it's individualised. It's intended that the services and supports that a person will use will change over their lifetime, and that they will be able to get that change recognised in their plan and key transition points from children entering school, from going through adolescence, from leaving school, going into community and workforce, points at leaving home, points at entering and leaving relationships, all critical points in people's lives, and the scheme needs to be flexible to change the supports that are delivered to reflect those changing needs. And the start of that is to start with an understanding on behalf of both the agency and our participants that this is a long-term journey and not a point in time assessment from which they will be held accountable into the future. And so that discussions, those sorts of discussions, we find already take time. One of the things we have found, and certainly has been responsible for when we early on fell a little bit behind in the completion rate, is that people want time to think about that. No one, for a lot of people in existing service systems, no one has ever said to them before, what do you want to achieve? It's always been about what do you need. So as soon as you reframe it, that conversation differently, you have to allow the time to build the relationship. So we're very focused on also providing that local coordination 6 months in advance of the planning discussion. And they'll do a lot of the pre-planning. And the final point in terms of the building this scheme and the scale for it is, while I'm very conscious personally of the demands faced by the agency to build up our services and systems and to employ the staff and find the officers that we need to deliver it, it is a massive task to build the supply of services and supports, to build up the market for people with disabilities. So it is both a scale issue, the amount of supports double from what they currently are, so it's a significant growth in just the volume of supports, but at the same time it's a fundamentally different service system. It's moving from one which is predominantly funded by way of programs in which people with disability are slotted into the programs, to one in which the funding goes to the control of the person and the service providers operate in a marketplace. And that's quite a confronting change for those providers, and one that we're working on. So the elements of this in terms of building a market is activity that's very much at our front and centre in the agency's thinking. And the first element of building that type of market is to have informed and capable consumers. So we're very much focused upon what are the responsibilities of the agency to get information into the hands of our participants, into the hands of people with disability. And we're doing work around setting up what we call an information e-market. So a place where providers will in effect advertise their wares, where people can go in and search for the types of supports that they're looking for, and over time that will provide feedback on how users of those services have rated them. And over a longer period of time, we'll be able to populate that site also with the agency's information on how those services and supports have gone in terms of delivering those outcomes, because we'll have that trend analysis. And that will be the strongest data of all. And we'll turn that also over time into a payment system. In terms of working to build the capability of our participants, we're already doing a number of pilots. We're piloting self-advocacy programs in a couple of the trial sites. We're piloting supported decision-making programs in New South Wales, Victoria, and indeed a little one in South Australia. They're quite different. Sometimes we do get advantages of these dispersed trial sites. So in Victoria, the supported decision making, which is being run through their public advocate's office, is one of a volunteer support. So a person who becomes a friend advocate to the person with the disability and an assistance to engage with both the agency and the wider sector. The one in Newcastle, which is an extension of a program being run by the public trustee, is much more around professional support for people who meet the criteria of the public trustee, which is around lack of legal capacity